Hello and welcome to Talking Shit About, a monthly podcast where I, Elizabeth Whipperman, interview someone about something they love, something they hate, something they've been through, or something they just know a lot about, and hopefully by the end we've all learned something. This was a super fun conversation with Abby from Political Psych with Abby about dehumanization and AI. So this episode is for anybody who has posted something online and been accused of being AI, or alternatively, if you are someone who sees something online, immediately jumps the gun and goes, "You're AI, this post is AI." We're going to dive into what that means for the accuser, the accusee, and just kind of a broad conversation. I love this conversation with Abby. It's absolutely fantastic. Stay tuned at the end for some important show updates, but for now, let's go ahead and talk some shit.
I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I have friends that are firefighters and I know that they use soap.
And she was screaming at me over soup.
Fuck this, I am not ever talking to a Scientologist again. These people are all insane.
I'm putting my bricks in the dumpsters, motherfuckers. Do you see me, bitches? I'm throwing my bricks. And he's just like chucking bricks.
Hello, everybody. I'm here today with Abby from Political Psych with Abby. Abby, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. So I have a YouTube channel about political psychology, which is the psychology of politics. So that can be anything from why people go to protests to why they hold the political opinions they do, how they vote the way they do, it even touches on political violence, all that kind of stuff. I also have a master's in political psychology and I've done some related work professionally. And I also, my climate activism work, I do draw on political psychology for that.
And what was your inspiration for starting Political Psych?
Yeah. I didn't start the field of political psychology,
Oh,
right?
the
Did
program,
for a
yeah.
while before me. But for starting my YouTube channel, I had, seen some really good like educational content on YouTube, but most of the stuff I had seen that touched on it from like a politics perspective took like a more political science or philosophy approach or like a more general like commentary approach. I hadn't really seen a lot of stuff that like talked about social psychology in a way that was a little bit more informal and a little bit more fun. And certainly nothing that like really touched on political psychology specifically. And so I thought that that was sort of like an interesting niche to play around with. And I've always liked making graphics and I like writing and that kind of thing. So like having a YouTube channel seemed like a fun thing. I think I was originally planning on starting it when I was like farther into my master's, but I actually started it the summer before my master's because it was the pandemic and I had literally nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how this podcast started too. Pandemic baby.
Yeah.
One thing we definitely wanted to talk about while you were here was AI. Are you cool with just kind of jumping into that topic?
So
Cool.
yeah, I after I put out my most recent video as of recording, which is about collective narcissism and politics, I was debating like what my next video topic should be. And because my videos are like super research heavy, I don't get them out all that frequently, right? So I have to, really commit to a topic. And I had some other ideas, some of which I will probably do, but then I happened to be on vacation with my mom and my husband, and we were at a restaurant. Like we were on Cape Cod, we were at a pizza place, we were sitting outside, like it was all like very low tech, very chill, right? And we and there's this family that comes out of the restaurant, and the teenage kid says to the dad, Dad, don't call yourself an NPC. That's horrible. And I'm like, oh, wow, this like dehumanizing internet language has like made it out into like the real world. Because, this isn't some, Reddit conversation or something on Twitter. Like, this is a conversation between like a teenager and their dad, like out in public, right? And so I sort of became interested in the way that like technology shapes dehumanization, and the political implications of that. And so I wanted to tie that into AI. And I'm also tying that into like the term NPC, like the concept of like the non-player character, which is of course like fine in a video game context, but I think is dehumanizing in the context of like calling a person that. And then also the idea of like bots. Because I had an experience a long time ago that I've been like kind of wanting to talk about for a while, where I was working for a political campaign and they were having us like text people, and I kept being accused of being a bot by
Oh
like the people
no.
I was texting. And the thing is, like, I've done, a lot of like phone calls and door knocking for like political campaigns. I've like had people say some pretty nasty stuff to me, right? And
Mhm.
also like, I make political content on the internet, so like I have had people say nasty stuff to me. But it really specifically hurt, and I think it hurt in like a strange way to be called a bot specifically. And so like I wanted to sort of get to the bottom of that a little bit, and also like reckon with the fact that as AI use is increasing, it's going to get easier to basically say that someone who is a human isn't a human and is instead something technological. And I really expected when I originally went into this project that there would be like a ton of research, because I don't, you see AI articles and new books and podcasts and whatever about AI like constantly, right? Like it's a huge topic. And it's a huge, especially compared to like a lot of the topics I talk about are like not widely discussed. So I thought like, oh, I'm going to find so much research. It's going to be so easy. But there was actually very little on AI and dehumanization. Like there's a lot about what happens when AI or bots gets mistaken for people. There's much less on what happens when people get mistaken for something that is technological and not a person.
Wow, there is a lot here to dive into. It's funny that you brought up the NPC because yesterday I like was thinking about something and in my head referred to myself as an NPC, and I never like considered how like dehumanizing that is.
Yeah, I
But I
mean,
would. Oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I mean, I think like if you're thinking like, oh, I'm off on my little thing to go pick up something from the village. I'm such an NPC. That's like fine, right? If you're like, oh man, I'm really doing a thing that a background character in an RPG would do. Like, I don't think that's dehumanizing. I think the idea of like acting like another person is not a person, but just like uh a thing that exists in your quest is the issue, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I'd like to take a step back. So I know I'm familiar with the term dehumanization, but for anyone who's listening who's maybe never heard that term before or aren't really sure what that means, could you kind of like explain that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is like a fairly debated term, like the exact nuances of it are debated within like political science and psychology and philosophy, but I think that a useful definition is basically conceptualizing or treating a person as something less than human. And like historically, a lot of dehumanization has been like likening people to animals, especially
Mhm.
pests. Like, the sort of like typical example of dehumanization that you're given in like an intro psych class is, Nazi propaganda likening Jews to bugs and rats, that kind of thing.
And also on the point about you being mistaken for a bot, I have that like paranoia all the time because I use a lot of M dashes and commas, and my
Yeah.
writing style is like a little odd, and apparently it's like pretty similar to how AI writes. So yeah, I am like totally paranoid that people are gonna think I'm a bot. So I love that you're looking into that and sort of the psychology behind that.
No, it is a thing, right? Like I think people get mistaken for bots more often than is admitted. And I think the thing is also that like a lot of people who are getting mistaken for bots on a regular basis are people who are already in like marginalized positions in society, right? Like there's this whole thing of like ghost work, which is deliberately hiding human labor behind AI. It's this idea, right? Like of a lot of moderation work or training AI models, the big tech company will say, "Oh, this is our AI. Isn't it fancy? Isn't it high tech? Isn't it like shiny?" And what it actually is a lot of the time is a combination of technology, but way, way more small increments of work done by underpaid people in the global south than those tech companies want to admit.
And I feel like AI is everywhere. And part of me wonders, yeah, like you mentioned, like how much of it is actually AI and how much of it is like just a regular computer program or software or whatever. Or like you said, like
Yeah.
people doing work.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting concepts I encountered when I was doing research for my video is the concept of AI as an ideology rather than a specific technology, which I think was really something that like unlocked a lot of this for me because I think there are, patterns in what counts as AI technology, right? It's usually using a lot of data and pattern recognition, right? But there are technologies that kind of do that that have not always been labeled as AI, right? Like there were things earlier on that would be called, big data or big data modeling that now you'd probably market them as AI, right? So there's this concept that like, actually, I can pull up the quote. Give me 1 second,
Yeah.
because I think that getting the specific quote for this is actually really useful. So yeah, this is a quote from Lanier and Weil in 2020, and they're both like AI theorists, and they're both honestly like Silicon Valley insiders. This was written when they were both working at Microsoft Research, I think, or as researchers for Microsoft. I don't know if that's specifically Microsoft Research, which may be its own organization. So their quote is AI is best understood as a political and social ideology rather than as a basket of algorithms. The core of this technology is that a suite of technologies, sorry, the core of this ideology is that a suite of technologies designed by a small technical elite can and should become autonomous from and eventually replace rather than complement not just individual humans, but much of humanity. So like the idea that AI ideologically is like specifically oriented around replacing people, but not just replacing people in a way that gives already powerful people even more power. And
Yeah.
I should say, like, I'm not like 100% AI negative, but I think that it is important to keep in mind that, like, yeah, this really is the ideology that is powering a lot of it, even if AI companies don't necessarily publicly admit that.
Where are some places that you've seen AI sort of being a tool to replace people?
I mean, I think part of where we're seeing it is like customer service. It's now like even harder to just like get a person,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have an issue with like a technical product. They'll be like, "Oh, we have a chat bot now." And it's like, "Okay, but what the chat bot is doing is pulling from the Q&A on your website, which I have already read, otherwise I wouldn't be contacting customer service." Right? And I think, it's because and that does play into ideology, right? Of like the technical elite, the people producing, mostly the people really heavily invested in those products, want it to be something that they control. Like they don't, I think there's a really high level of like individualism in the way that like people conceptualize the way that like tech products especially, but big companies in general should work, right? Like there's a lot of glorification of like CEOs and founders and entrepreneurs and much less like, you know, the people who provide decent customer service so that the fancy software you've developed actually works, right? Or the people who write the basic code, right? Because a lot of coders are being replaced by AI too, or at least there's like the effort to replace them by AI. And I think part of it is like, so there are some things where like AI can be really, really useful, like especially with computer programming, right? But I think a lot of the times it doesn't really replace people at least as well as people can do a job. But I think that it's also like it's a lever, right? Like a boss can say, "Hey, don't ask for a raise because if you become too expensive, we'll just replace you with AI," right? So I think that that's a big part of it is like the idea of like reducing the leverage of workers, I think is really a big part of AI. And I think it's like when people get rich and powerful enough in our current system, they develop this bizarre delusion of like autonomy from other people and the idea that like they should just be able to control things without having to involve too many other people, especially other people who might not be like rich or might be difficult to control, if you get what I mean.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think that that's a big part of it. I also think the desire to use AI to replace artists is really interesting because, and I especially see this like in a political context, I especially see this like on the right. And I think a big part of that is because art, I mean, artists are like systematically devalued, especially economically, but I think that they're especially devalued on the right because artists are considered like, you know, hippie-ish or like, potentially outside of like the the conception of like what an acceptable person is if you're on the right, especially on the far right. And so I think that like this is why like AI art is becoming like the aesthetic of like rising fascism in the United States, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this episode's going to come out way after this is a topic on the news, but there was like the whole medbed situation
Yeah.
where like Trump shared a video, an AI video of himself.
Yeah.
Unclear if he thought it was real or not, but talking about medbeds. So yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean that's like nuts. Yeah, I mean, I think that that's like the misinformation element of AI that people do talk about more. Not that they shouldn't, like it is incredibly important, but that's sort of the element that gets discussed more frequently. But yeah, I mean, the ability to create like false reality is disturbing. And I think with specifically like the dehumanization element, I think that the creation of like synthetic people is a really important thing to keep in mind. Like, especially like, okay, so this is less the direction the video is going on because the video is all about like, mistaking real things for AI. But
Mhm.
I think that it is important to talk about like the creation of synthetic people with AI, especially synthetic women and especially like synthetic women to fulfill like men's sexual desires, right?
Mhm.
And I think like what's obvious is like, the AI girlfriends with like the giant tits, right? Like
Mhm.
I think that that's obvious, but I think that what's maybe even more insidious is like the AI images of like trad wives and stuff. Like, you know, you're so delusional about what women can be. You're not even just posting, ads from the 1950s of a reality that never existed. You're posting like perfectly smooth simulated things drawn from an aggregate of those AI ads that existed in the 1950s of a reality that never existed, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the AI women because as we were talking, I wrote that down, but we are so on the same wavelength. Yeah, I like skeeted something the other day that was like, these tech bros love AI women because they can't say no.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think that that is a huge part of it, right? I think it is the not being able to say no, the not having control thing. I think the whole like AI chatbot dating thing, I think is also like I think that there are some people into that who are like who aren't necessarily bad people, but who are just really, really lonely people.
mhm,
But I still think that it's a bad thing for society overall because I mean, this is a less scientific thing, but I'm a very big believer in like love, and
mhm,
mutual love, right? And I think the critique people most often have of like these chatbots people date, right, is that it can't love you.
mhm,
But I think that a big part of it is that you can't really love it in the same way that you love a person, right? Because like a person is someone who you sacrifice for, right? Who you do things and you might have to grow as a way to like and change through your relationship with them. And like a person is someone who can surprise you and who can need things from you. And I think that an AI chatbot isn't really something that can actually need something from you. Like it can simulate needing something from you, but that's really just more of an extension of one's own desires, right? Like it's all masturbatory. And this isn't me like this is not me criticizing masturbation. Like I think masturbation is fine, but I think that it's wrong to have like masturbatory social relationships, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, AI, I think we've talked about this on at least another episode, but it's definitely not a replacement for genuine human connection.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
telling you what you want to hear, and like with relationships, any kind of relationship, whether it's friendship or romantic, like there is conflict. I hate conflict. I don't like it, but that's part of a relationship and learning how to negotiate that.
And I think it also has to do with like, people in your life that love you, like they'll push back against you for certain things. And also, I mean, this is also why I think that like AI bots for therapy are like a potentially an issue because they're like endlessly validating. And like I do want to clarify, like I am not a mental health professional, like that's not my area of psychology, but a good therapist is someone who like will back against you and like challenge you and be like, okay, is that actually what you think, or is that what you want people to think you think? That kind of thing. And that level of like metacognition is just not something that like a bot is capable of. And also, like, I think people talk a lot about, with AI therapy of like, not being comfortable saying things to another person. And I do get that, but I think that like a human therapist is very important as like an intermediate step, but like a human therapist is very important as like an intermediate step between thinking something and being able to talk about it in a productive way with the people in your life, right? And I don't think like an AI is really a useful bridge in that way. One other thing I wanted to say about like AI companions, I think also is like that it has to do with like the monetization of like human friendships and connection, right? And it's weird because it's like I think that companies, and I'm not sure how consciously aware people at these companies are that they're capitalizing on this, but I think there's been a realization that loneliness is more profitable than healthy social bonds,
Hmm.
you know? And that it's it's profitable to cultivate loneliness. Now, maybe a more comfortable version of loneliness, but that is still kind of loneliness.
Hmm. Unless you had any other thoughts on this one, do you want to kind of switch back to the politics aspect
Oh,
of it?
definitely. Yeah. A lot of the stuff is like not even going to be in my video, but it's just like stuff I've been thinking about.
Oh yeah, no, it's super interesting. I loved our little
And
aside
that'll be
here.
good because it'll mean that like when the podcast comes out, I'll be like, here's a bunch of stuff I couldn't put in the video. Listen to it.
So, how have you seen AI like impact how we talk about politics? Whether that's, I'm assuming, probably mostly online. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's impacted politics in a lot of ways. I think one thing, like the clearest thing is the idea, people, saying, "Oh, that's a deep fake, like that's fake." And a big part of that is like, okay, there are actual deep fakes and those do potentially have actual impact, right? Like, the medbed thing you were talking about earlier, right? Like that is an issue, right? But I think a big part of it as well is that it becomes not just easier to create fake reality, but easier to deny actual reality. So there's this concept of the liar's dividend, which is like basically it's the idea that as it gets easier to lie convincingly with technology like AI and image generation, the harder it becomes to prove that you are telling the truth and to have people believe you that you're telling the truth. So, an example of this is like, Trump's claim that like there was a particular rally where there was really big turnout for Kamala Harris, and Trump was like, oh, that crowd is fake, it's AI, right? And I think that that is a bigger issue than people might realize because so it bothers me specifically because I think it's really, really important to treat other people as real political actors, right? Including people who like aren't politicians, right? conceptualizing people who showed up for a political thing as people who showed up for a political thing, right? It's the same reason that like it's wrong to accuse people of being, paid agitators, right? But it's actually even worse because it's not saying, oh, these people are only showing up for a paycheck. It's saying these people aren't people, right? And so I think that that's an issue. I think it does also tie into something that I want to criticize about like the left half of the political spectrum in this country, which is the idea that like Trump support and everything like comes so heavily from like Russian bots. And like Russian bots are like a real thing, but their impact is seriously overestimated. This country is capable of being, bigoted and racist and hating the poor on all on its own. And we do need to like actually seriously contend with that, right? Now, I am not saying at all that we need to, you know, cave to these positions. That's the complete opposite of what I'm saying, but I think we need to contend with the fact that they are positions that a number of people genuinely hold, right? And like figure out what to do from there. And the whole like you're a bot thing, it has spiraling implications, really. Like the denial that the other side is real. Because part of the reason, so the history of the NPC meme that I was talking about earlier, and this is why, like, this connection is why I'm talking about NPCs and bots and AI, like, all together, because politically they're really, really intertwined phenomena. So the history of the NPC meme is that it started on 4chan, basically, as far as we can tell. And that the idea, like, it started out as this idea, like, other people are other people really people? And then it picked up a Psychology Today article that they were slightly misinterpreting about other people not having inner speech. Inner speech is like an internal monologue, kind of. But obviously, some people not having internal speech doesn't mean that they don't have like an inner life, right? Because you can think in ways other than like an internal monologue, right? But this led to this idea of NPCs becoming very popular on 4chan, and that got boosted and politicized, I think. It became increasingly popular because a lot of the people on 4chan and later on more right-leaning subreddits like r slash the Donald and that kind of thing were people who had experiences being accused of being Russian bots. So it was sort of a like, no, you're a bot type thing, right? And that's not necessarily like a universal experience for people spreading like the NPC terminology. And I don't want to cut people spreading this dehumanizing terminology like too much slack. Especially because, some of those people on 4chan and r/slash the Donald, a significant fraction of them are like really, really, really politically noxious, right? But I do think that specifically conceptualizing opposition as not human is actually far worse than conceptualizing them as bad for the sake of like being able to have political discourse, but also even like so also even for the sake of like being able to achieve political victories. Like it's bad for your ability to strategize if you think that the other side is made up of bots, right? And I'm gonna be fully transparent here. Like I am very left-leaning. And my content is not like intended to be politically neutral. So like a big reason that I'm criticizing the right is bots thing is because I think that until the left contends with the fact that the right are real people, and honestly, this is something I see more from like mainstream Democrats than the far left. I think the far left are reasonably aware that the far right are real people, and that the right are real people. But I think that I like conceptualizing your opposition as not people makes it easier to just dismiss them and not actually contend with them in a way that could improve society. But I also think that dehumanization has a tendency to make it easier for people to commit atrocities, right? So I worry, that a person who conceptualizes people as NPCs is more willing to do horrible things to them. Be this a context like a mass shooting or a context like, you know, I live in Chicago, and you probably are aware of what's happening with
Mm-hmm.
ICE and everything right now. And I think, I would be really, really shocked if ICE agents are conceptualizing the people they're detaining as fully human, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that, I think, maybe currently, older forms of dehumanization where they're thinking of them as animals, that kind of thing. But I think that as our world becomes more infused with the ideas from these technologies, that we need to be like very vigilant for the dehumanization that is like specifically using the terminology and the concepts from these technologies.
Just kind of observation, but the ICE ads are like everywhere. And you see a lot of them, they have like text or speech that's like, these dangerous criminals, these violent people, and like using criminal language as like dehumanizing because in
Yeah,
America we're so like, when I say we, I mean like
yeah.
like nation we, I guess, you know what I mean. But like we view people who are incarcerated as like less than deserving human rights.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely. And I also like there is evidence to show that like dehumanization reduces like calls for justice, which is like important, like that the more a population is dehumanized, the less other people will call for that population to be protected. So it's not just dehumanization relating to deliberate harm, it's dehumanization relating to like lack of protection, right?
mhm.
Yeah. And I think also like, you know, there was a thing a couple months ago where they, had a like Studio Ghibli style,
Oh my
thing
God.
of someone being detained by ICE. Like, yeah, it's insane, right? But it is what I was talking about before with like the AI art and stuff as the aesthetic of fascism, right? I'm not describing all AI art as fascistic. Like some of it's good, a lot of it's just sort of mediocre, but some of it is extremely fascist.
Do you have any examples that you've seen?
Of
Yeah,
the
I
like
don't know.
the fascist stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is like the tradwife stuff I was talking about earlier and like the ICE stuff, but a lot of it, I mean, I think some of it is also like the Trump Riviera stuff, like with Gaza.
Oh my
Um
God, yes.
yeah, is like that was extremely like a fascist in my view. It was like very much like, and I think part of it is because it's sort of art but without people, without artists, right? Like it's very it's an ex like it's a desire to like extend the individual will and like exert that upon others, right? Which comes back to like the tech sort of ideology that even the tech ideologies that aren't, specifically fascist. The idea that like you as an individual should be able to have this like level of control, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. And yeah, I think it's also like in the case of like the Gaza Riviera thing, it was, deleting the people without specifically contending with that, right? And that is literally genocidal ideology, right? So, yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about how we need to change our conception of like what humanity means. I think that we have a tendency to define humanness in terms of usefulness, especially in like elite professional spaces and especially in like very tech infused spaces. And I think that in order to lessen this tech infused dehumanization, that we need to conceptualize and value humans for something other than how potentially useful they are, especially how potentially useful they are economically.
Mhm.
Because like the stuff I was saying before about like okay, tech's not actually like this AI stuff is not actually as good as people for most tasks. That's true. But, there are people in society who are probably less useful for the economic things available to them than an AI is, right? People who are very severely disabled, children, that kind of thing. And that's kind of always going to be true. And the more useful AI technology becomes, the more people are going to end up in that category. And I think we need to be able to conceptualize something that means that those people are fully human, because I think that a lot of the ways in which because I think that because of tech people getting really excited about science fiction, and don't get me wrong, I love science fiction. I met my husband in a science fiction and fantasy club, but I think because of science fiction and the way people get really excited about AI technology, we're always like, oh, when will the AI technology become human? When will it become indistinguishable from humans? And that it's that we can never let it happen. That we're not able to distinguish AI technology from humans, like ideologically, like philosophically. And but I think that in order to do that, we need to have a definition of human that isn't based off of what humans can do, but is based off of like what humans are, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because like even if a chatbot like would be indistinct, even if a let's say I have a pen pal relationship, I never see someone in person. And let's say we have a Turing test perfect chatbot that I'm having a conversation with. I think it's very, very important to realize that there are things that I can do to that chatbot that wouldn't be ethical for me to do to a person. And that we have to disentangle the ability from like the moral duty. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think that part of this entanglement and also part of the reason that like the mistaking humans for AI or bots or NPCs is under discussed is because a lot of thinking and writing about AI comes from very elite tech spaces where it is a certain culture and people tend to think a certain way, right? And that it's mostly thinking of, oh, how can we make this more useful? What if it becomes too useful? What if it takes over the world? And less, okay, what is happening to people who are being anonymously slotted into AI systems as ghost workers in the global south right now, because the people who are able to get book deals or who are paid to theorize about this kind of thing are not people who are marginalized peace workers and marginalized ghost workers in the global south, or people who are frequently mistaken for bots, right? Like I think that the digital denial of humanity is not something that people who write about AI frequently experience, and that's why it's like so severely under discussed.
Yeah,
Oh, and
I'm also a big sci-fi person, and as you were talking, I was thinking about this game series Mass Effect, and how how playing it, I was always like, oh yeah, the AI, and like they deserve rights, and they're like, at what point is a robot a human? And then like I haven't played that game in a few years, but now I'm like, I wonder if I'll feel the same playing that game now that like we're
yeah,
in this sort of like I don't know, middle school me loved reading dystopian novels, was really, oh, I
yeah.
wish we lived in exciting times and now we're here and I regret it.
Oh yeah, I completely despise living in exciting times. Like, and it's funny. I think this is a little off topic from the AI thing, and I have like one AI thing I want to get back to at the end.
Mhm.
But I think that there are some people who are into politics because it's like interesting to them, and it's almost like they're into it in the way that like some people are really into like cool rocks or trains or that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I was like that a bit when I was younger, but it's really not like that for me now. Like I've always been very interested in people. Like that is an intellectual interest for me. But that the reason that I do politics stuff now isn't really because I think it's interesting, although I do. It's because I care about the outcomes. And that it's weird for me now thinking in terms of like there are people just doing this because they just think it's like interesting and it's like a game for them. And I see a lot of this from like debate bro type content, like people who just want to like argue about stuff. And I'm just like, I am so not interested in like just sparring. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not an interest of mine, right? I mean, for me, like I'm interested in people. My undergrad majors were psychology and modern history, and originally I wanted to apply psychology to the study of history, and I eventually, I did my master's in political psychology because I was like, oh man, I really feel like this pull, this obligation to do something that will affect the present day and the future. Especially because like when I was in college, I got like really involved in like climate activism, and that's still like my primary form of activism. Like I do a lot of climate activism. That's kind of part of why my videos come out infrequently, is because in addition to having now like two jobs, I also have kind of a third job doing climate activism stuff. Um, yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned there was something else related to AI that you wanted
Yeah.
to touch on.
Oh, yeah. The one thing, so I am not completely opposed to people using AI. I do worry about the theft from artists. I worry about the water use. I worry about people potentially becoming unemployed. And I worry about all the dehumanization stuff we've been talking about earlier. And I'm sure there are other concerns that I haven't mentioned. I'm not completely ideologically opposed to the use of AI type technologies, but I am completely opposed to the idea of using them and then not labeling them as such, because
Mm-hmm.
my view is that any application for which AI can be used in a way that isn't harmful is an application where it can be used where it is labeled as AI. And I also think that if people label when they are using AI, it will somewhat reduce the suspicion that humans are AI when they aren't. Now, a lot of people will still lie, so it will still be an issue. And possibly if we develop norms around labeling AI, it'll be a little bit easier for those people to get away with it. But I think that from an ethical perspective, like anyone who is trying to use AI at all ethically should label when they are doing so and be transparent about it. And that includes in like advertising contexts and
Mm-hmm.
and customer service contexts and all those kind of contexts.
Yeah. Again, I don't know how relevant this is going to be once this episode airs, but there's the Tilly AI actress that's been kind
Yeah.
of like in the news. And I was looking at, I almost said her Instagram, the Instagram. And there's a clear line of in their post where Instagram started requiring you to label AI because, the first few photos or whatever aren't labeled as AI. And it seems totally innocuous. This little brunette white girl posting about getting coffee or shopping or whatever. And so, yeah, the amount of people that didn't know that was AI, I probably wouldn't have realized it was AI
Yeah.
until it started getting labeled. So, yeah, it's.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. And yeah, I think that labeling it is important, and labeling it in a way that people will actually notice it is also important. I really don't like the use of like human pronouns for
Mhm.
AI products. I feel like it's a little bit different if it's like a character because we have norms around like using, describing characters as if they're people. That's just fiction, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I don't even like it when people call Siri she. I'm like, that's not a woman. That's a thing, right? And so I feel very strongly that like AI tools should be referred to as it. right? Or potentially, no, I think, yeah, I think they is bad, even if you're referring to like, because you could be referring to the company, but I think it is probably best. I mean, that does become a little bit complicated because, some people will use it pronouns for themselves, but I do think that, it is the best pronoun not the best, is it the pronoun if it's not describing a person? I'm forgetting my grammar for a
I
second.
have an English degree and I couldn't tell you, but I'm going to go ahead
Okay.
and say that's
Yeah.
right. We're going to go
Okay.
with it.
But I do think that it is like the best word we currently have to describe something that is an object or tool. And I think it's extremely important to conceptualize these things as tools and as objects, especially when people are referring to them in front of like children who are developing their speech.
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 Oh my God. I didn't even. Oh, the children. I feel so
Oh my
bad for the
God. Yeah.
children.
This is a slightly different topic, but I am extremely anti iPad kid.
Yeah.
Like not the kids. It's obviously not the kids'
Yeah.
fault,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like please, 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 people need to not like prop their kids in front of iPads. Um, because I mean, so the data on this isn't completely in, but I've taught child psych like intro child psych a couple times and taken some child psych classes. Please, for the love of God, have conversations with your kids. It's so important to their development. I think people are like, oh, it's the screens rotting their brains. And it's not like the screens are necessarily good for them. But what I actually worry about is parents and other adults in kids' lives not having social interactions with them and not playing with them more than I worry about like the screens themselves.
Hmm.
As you probably have gotten, I'm a big human interaction person.
That's, yeah, picking up on that. I am too.
Yeah.
Um, so I recently, it's not really technically related to AI, but since we're sort of on the topic, I found this Guardian article a while back, and it was kind of the perspective of Sephora workers and how they're seeing kids, specifically girls, come in and how they perceive themselves. It's extremely depressing. The article doesn't really necessarily talk about AI specifically, but I imagine, seeing these pictures of like what they perceive to be real women and having
Yeah.
these literally unattainable beauty standards really bums me out.
Yeah, I think that that's part of it. And I also think that what's really interesting about AI is that like it generates that unattainable beauty as a default, right?
Hmm.
It's one thing if you say, make an impossibly beautiful woman. It's another thing if you say, make a woman and it just makes a completely flawless looking woman by default, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then the thing that really stood out to me from the Guardian article was the statistics on how many kids are using technology. So this says 43% of Gen Alpha in the US had tablets before the age of 6.
Ugh.
58% received their first iPhone by age 10. And research from 2023 described social media use as nearly universal at 95% for those ages 13 to 17 and 40% for those 8 to 12.
Yeah, that really is something. I think what's interesting is people are like, kids are on their goddamn phones, right?
Hmm.
But I see so many parents out
Yeah.
ignoring their kids in favor of like the phones and stuff, right?
Hmm.
And I think that that's like, because, parents and other people who are around kids model the behavior, right? So, and also, kids want social interaction. They want interesting things to happen around them. So, like, in order to entice young people out into the physical world, adults have to be doing cool stuff and interacting with them in that world. And I also think that there is a huge problem of like limiting what young people are allowed to do, like in the physical world. Like there's a mall in downtown Chicago where like there's a sign up that says like if you're under 18, you have to be accompanied by an adult. And like this is just
The
like a
mall.
normal
Yeah.
mall in the downtown and under 18. And I'm like, isn't the mall like where teenagers are supposed to go hang out? Like
Yeah.
it's got, yeah, it's got a Sephora, it's got like a little bakery, it's got a movie theater. Like this is where teens should go, right? And, I think that a lot of life for teens, especially in the US and especially in the suburbs, is kind of, being locked inside. So of course you're going to do whatever the most stimulating thing is that's available to you inside, right? So, I don't know. We should probably let teenagers wander around and make trouble more often.
Yes,
Um,
agreed.
like that's like generally my view is like the rest of the world needs to be more exciting in order to draw people like off their phones. Yeah, and also probably don't give little kids iPads. Or if you do, like, limit time on them the way that like, because like when I was a kid, right, people were worried about like TV, right? And I knew a lot of people who like, if the kids were really into TV, they'd be limited to like 1, 2 hours a day. And I actually think that that's like an okay approach to iPads as long as I mean, I wouldn't give like a small child like unfettered access to like YouTube or social media, but like if they want to play a game on the iPad, I don't really think that that's like worse than playing a game on like, the gaming systems that were available when I was a small child. I just think that it should be like time limited and shouldn't happen in restaurants,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel my brain starting to go down a rabbit hole about TikTok, so we should probably
Yeah,
switch it up.
especially like I've like never been on TikTok, so like I'm probably not the right person to talk to about TikTok.
Maybe that'll be another episode.
Yeah.
Um,
I do have a video about social media and politics, so I am able to talk about that. But that would probably be its own episode.
well, maybe we'll have you back.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on for this episode?
No, I think that's it, other than telling people that the video will probably be out by the time the episode comes out.
And if people would like to watch it and enjoy your work, how can they do that?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is Political Psych with Abby. If you type that into the search bar, you'll get it. I figure it'll probably also be linked in the description.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I also have Instagram, Reddit, various things, Patreon if you really like my stuff, but YouTube is where I like, make the original stuff.
Awesome. I will be sure to include links to all of that in the show
Yep.
notes for you. Well, Abby, I've had a great time with this conversation. So many great little rabbit holes. And yeah, I really appreciate the work that you're doing to help educate people. And, we need as many activists right now as we can. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
That is a wrap for this month's interview. We'll be back again in 2 weeks for a microsode, and it's going to be ASMR part 2. And then in January, we'll be back with another interview. It's about recovery and rock and roll. Very excited about it. It's going to be part of a larger series. However, after receiving some feedback on the grief series, I've decided not to post them all at once. They'll be kind of scattered throughout. So keep an eye out for those. I'm very excited for you to hear that interview. I have an update to our Patreon because I just started a full-time job again. Yay. I don't have the capacity to be posting on Patreon 4 or 5 times a month, so I am lowering the price to $2 a month, and the posts will be a little bit more infrequent, but you'll still get that extra bonus content, behind the scenes content, early access, etc., etc. So you can check that out at patreon.com/talkingshitabout. Episodes will still come out once a month. Interviews, like I said, once a month. Microsodes once a month. If you are not yet following the show, I would please ask you to do that. Hit follow on your favorite podcasting platforms. Turn on automatic downloads, and you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And I have links to all of that in the show notes, as well as links to all of Abby's stuff in the show notes. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again.